Hello friends, welcome back to Commute Talk. Today I thought I would talk a little bit about getting faster as a programmer and fighting with the compiler less, because it's something that affects all of us, and it's a subject that I've thought a bit about lately and find it interesting. So I think that probably everyone who's been programming in a compiled language is very familiar with the edit compile test cycle. Where you edit your code and you compile your code and you test your code to figure out what you got to edit next, right? And I think that it's like a very logical mode of doing work, but I think we spend a lot of time in the edit compile and like sort of ping-ponging between those two, maybe more than we would like to admit. And it's only like every so often that we get to the test part. But we've sort of conditioned ourselves to ignore the fact that we are ping-ponging between edit and compile. And I've been a huge time waster like that myself in the past, and I've actively tried to spend less time doing that. So I guess that's what I thought I would talk about. So I think that the edit compile test cycle is like kind of destructive in a way, or at least it's addictive and not in a good way. And the problem is that when you constantly relying on the compiler to tell you what you're screwing up, then you're never really internalizing what your mistakes were, because you just type, and then you let the compiler tell you what you screwed up. But the compiler is not instant, at least not if you invoke it like on a command line or the keybind or whatever. And you're sort of training yourself to accept this weird latency between doing something and then learning if it was right or wrong. And it doesn't have to be that way. So one of the biggest quality of life improvements I've had in recent years was switching wholesale to using Qt Creator as my development environment, because the integration it has with the client compiler is just fantastic. And if I make some kind of mistake in my code that would not compile, like 99% of the time it will tell me. And it will tell me while I'm typing. It would like just show this thing in red, like hey, this thing is not going to compile. And it's not perfect right now for me, because like I'm using GCC to build Serenity, but I'm using Clang inside of Qt Creator. So sometimes there are little subtle differences, and I hit that a few times, that like something that would compile with GCC wouldn't compile with Clang and vice versa, but it's not a major thing. 99% of the time it works, and as I've gotten used to this, I've totally managed to retrain my brain, and now it seems perfectly logical to me that if I'm making a mistake, I just see it right then and there. And I don't tend not to look at the text of the error, or at least I think I'm kind of trying to avoid it. I just I notice the red, and then I try to work out for myself what the problem is. And I think that's part of I guess consciously trying to get better at programming, is I think it's okay for the compiler to tell you that, like, hey, something is wrong here, and it's great that it'll tell you in detail what's wrong. But if you want to improve, you can try to work out for yourself what's wrong, because that'll teach you to recognize it better next time, if that makes sense. And another thing that I also do, it used to be consciously, but now it's become this like second nature habit, basically, is to try to go for longer periods without compiling. So what I do is that I just keep typing out my program, and I might like stop and adjust, like, hey, the compiler tells me that this part is red here, right? The editor tells me, so I'll fix that kind of stuff if I spot it. But other than that, I'll just keep going and going and going for like a long time, maybe sometimes 5-10 minutes, maybe even 15 minutes or 20 on the rare occasion. But just keep programming and programming, because this allows me to stay at a higher level of abstraction, because I really think that there are fundamentally two levels of abstraction that matter when you're programming. There's like the design level, where you are thinking about like the object model and ownerships and like responsibilities and that type of stuff. And then there's like the lowest level, where you're like putting the semicolon in the right place and like forgetting the exclamation point and stuff like that. And that's like, and in between that, there's this huge spectrum, of course, of layers. But I think that while I'm in that first edit part of the first cycle before I compile anything, I'm at the highest point in the abstraction layers in my mind. And I like to stay there for as long as possible. So I like to just keep churning out code more and more and more, because it means that more of the code was written at the highest level of thinking that I had to offer, or whatever. And then by the time it starts to feel like, okay, well, this is getting somewhere close to maybe finished or workable, or at least we should try it now, that's when I start to try to interact with the actual compiler and try to fix up whatever he complains about. And I think that sort of stuff makes sense as a programming exercise that makes you better, because I can definitely tell that this makes me better. But it is exhausting. So it's a bit like interval training, I guess, that you do something really, really intensely for a bit, and then you like slow down, go at a nice steady pace for a while, and then you do it really intensely again. And you're sort of you're putting yourself on the spot in that really intense mode, and pushing yourself. And then I find, at least, that it's very, very good for my programming skills, because it makes me better at spotting mistakes myself, staying in the high level abstractions for longer, and I guess just like taking responsibility for my program that I'm writing. And then there's another thing that I've discovered is very good for getting faster and better as a programmer. But it might not be for everyone. But I noticed that after I started recording my programming and posting the videos on the internet, I've definitely switched into a higher gear of like holding myself to a higher standard. So if I say I record for like half an hour or an hour or something like that, then I'm not screwing around in that hour basically at all, right? Like, I don't go looking at memes on the internet or like shoot the shit on IRC or anything. It's just like I just sit down and I work on the task that I decide for myself to work on, right? And that's another way of putting yourself on the spot that you can do. I really think that putting yourself on the spot in a way that you yourself can handle, but still, like, you're on the spot, you're expected to deliver, expected from yourself, that it just puts you into a higher gear that you really benefit from being in occasionally. Now, I couldn't stay in this gear all the time. Like, I see these people who post like 6-hour sessions or 9-hour sessions or whatever. Like, I implement a VI text editor clone from scratch in 10 hours. I don't think I could want to do that. I like to have like decompression time. Of course, I never actually watched the whole 10 hours of a video like that. Maybe they do have the decompression time built in. I don't know. That's a little too long for me to watch also. But these are just some things I was thinking about. So I guess that's what I had about that. So thanks for hanging out with me on the commute, and I'll see you guys next time.